sensitivity?
That would be your visual discriminator indication on the meter itself. So we can have that set at a higher or lower level. It's preset at 80, and normally that's about where it's going to stay.
On that program it's preset at 80.
On this particular program we're using now. If you were in an area where you were underneath power lines or something like that and your meter became jumpy, you might want to lower that a little bit.
And shouldn't we say then that the VDI sensitivity, there's an arbitrary place that now that's one that should be available to change and is, depending on the environment.
Absolutely.
And when the factory changes it, puts it at 80, and you go out and say, they thought it should be 80, and something is making it jump around, they're reading, and I've got a fly jumping around my face here. Now, that's an indication to lower it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you should push that up as far as you can without erratic behavior of the display.
Exactly.
So the display is calm and cool when you're not swinging it over the ground, then you know you're okay.
Down once again, we have DC phase, and it's turned off.
DC phase will, when it's turned on, give you the opportunity to read the value of a target or the ground with the trigger pulled or in the all-metal mode. And that will show up in the high right-hand corner as a numerical value. For example, with DC on, if we were to put the coil to the ground here in Oregon, we've been getting ground readings of minus 93 in that general area. This is pretty strong ground.
Shows heavy
mineralization.
Yeah.
Additionally, if we wanted to get the true VDI number for any metal target, say your ring, you would turn that on and hold it in front of the coil, and you would get the actual VD number that target represents.
Actually lay it right on the coil, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in the ground, a person the other day indicated to me that DC phase means I've got a no motion discrimination. He's right in a sense,
That's right.
but it doesn't have the depth of your detector.
No.
I mean, it will work at a few inches and give you a perfect idea of that coin, so you can just sneak under and put it over it, but you couldn't expect any real depth out of it for searching.
That's right. Another feature with the DC phase, and we use it at home, if we turn that on and we get a reading in the minus 90s, for example, we know that ground's a little hotter, and we can't use the sensitivities that we might be able to use if the ground was, say, minus 85. So if we're in a new area, that'll give us an idea of where to set our sensitivities right out of the chute.
Mm-hmm. Good.
We go down once again, and we've got graph averaging. Jimmy, you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, graph is the signograph that, of course, is unique to the spectrum. And that is the display on the screen that indicates by a bar graph generally what you're going over in the ground. Mm-hmm. So every target that you go over in the ground is indicated on that graph from the minus 95 to the plus 95 by a black bar.
Right.
Now, this is tied in with the accumulate as well as average, but the first one on the screen happens to be average on and off. Averaging is where it takes those targets that are hit more frequently. For example, if you went over a coin, you get a particular number. If you went over it again, you'd get maybe a little off number. It starts building right next to it. If in the process you went over a piece of trash in the sweep, you might get a little peg someplace else. Well, you'd go over the target more often if you were right over it, so that your average is going to build up the strongest signal and reduce the weaker signal. Right. So it gives you a better indication when you've got a good target. If you go down to the next control, which is graph accumulate, it allows this graph to build stronger. So if it was a strong signal, you'd get a big hit in the first place, but if it was a little one, it starts to build. So pretty soon you see the strength of this graph. I use that a lot because it gives me an idea of everything that's in the ground, and sometimes it'll show me I've got two targets because I've got a strong build up here and a strong build up here. I'll squeeze the trigger to pinpoint and find both those targets so that I can go over them in a different pattern and isolate them. So graph accumulate and graph average, I would leave on all the time. Now, if you
I leave them both on.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
That's when you get that smearing effect. When you get a bad target, you get multiple bars building, and that's what we call a smear.
That smear, especially a bottle cap, is smear the whole thing in one pass practically.
Right.
And that's an indication of, well, just one more piece of information.
That's right.
Besides the icon, besides the number, besides the audio signal, this thing is giving you a lot of information before you put your digging tool in the ground.
It's valuable information that you can pick up at a glance. And the engineering report, which is available on the XLT, has different types of signograph displays in there to show what a good target would look like or an iron target would look like. And this is, with using the accumulate average, we can affect how those appear on the screen somewhat.
One thing that I have found, it really, again, I refer back to England, the Roman bronze coins, I was sweeping too fast when I first got over there. And I was looking at a lot of trashy signals, a lot of smears. And the fellow working over in the side of me was getting Romans, and I thought, I'm missing something here. I took one of his coins, put it down, swept over it, it smeared. I slowed down my sweep speed. Lo and behold, the graph moved in. I got a better hit. So it showed me that I was sweeping too fast for that particular area, and my graph was helpful to be able to get the coins.
That's right.
The next one down is the fade rate.
Well, the fade rate has to do with how long that display is going to stay on the screen. And as it builds up, there are now, I believe, 12 levels on the display for any individual bar. And with the fade rate, we can have them stay indefinitely if we turn it down to 0, or we can have them go rather quickly if we turn it all the way up. It's a matter of personal preference. I personally like to see that fade rate set so that when I'm beginning my next sweep, the items from the last sweep are just disappearing right then. That gives me enough time when I hear the audio response to look down at the meter and I can see everything right there, but it doesn't begin to clutter and build on itself.
Of course, if you have a junky area, you certainly would want it to be slowed down because you could clear it up. My brain works a little slower, so I like to have it fading a little bit slower. I got time to think about it. So it's a matter of personal preference,
Sure.
isn't it? Yeah. Transmit boost.
Well, what they're doing here, you have when transmit boost is on, you're transmitting at full transmit power. And in most cases, that's probably where you want to be. But if you encounter bad ground, heavily mineralized ground, if you're running too high of transmit power, it's kind of like running your car in the fog with your lights on bright. You're not getting the penetration through the fog. So the same thing can be said about transmit boost. If you have mineralized ground, and it is definitely mineralized, you actually will get more depth by turning your transmit boost off. It's going to be able to penetrate the ground better.
That's the hardest single thing to explain to anyone, is that how they can go deeper by reducing the power going into the ground. But it's the most important thing to understand that that is the case. You're right. Yeah. You reduce the transmit power so you get less in the ground, you have less reflected back, and you can go deeper. But by the same token, this may be overkill for some area. So if you go into transmit boost off and you're in low transmitting power, particularly at a beach, you've got signal balance, which you'll talk about here, that will then can be increased to increase your receive signal and get back enough of that signal to still not lose too much depth.
That's right. Yeah. That's the way we prefer to use it.
Yeah, right.
A perfect example of that was I was hunting an old rodeo ground up in Missouri, and they had hauled in hot coal cinders and paved the arena with those coal cinders. And I hunted for a while and didn't detect any targets at all. Finally, I actually seen a coin laying on the ground. I went over there, waved my detector across it, wouldn't detect it. What in the world? First thing I did, I thought, I'm going to reduce my transmit power. Reduce my transmit power or my transmit boost, and started detecting them. Found several more coins after that. So it does, you actually can go deeper by less power.
Yeah. I like to use the example on the transmit boost of driving down a straight road or a curved road. You go down a straight road, you get from point A to point B at full throttle, you get there. You go down a curved road, point A to point B, full throttle, you don't get there. You cut back on your gas pedal, that's what the transmit boost reduction, and so getting from point A to point B is finding the coin.
That's right. Another time that we might want to think about turning that off is at a competition hunt, where we don't have to have the extra depth. We can give up some of that depth in order to avoid interference with other detectors.
Detectors, right.
We'll go down once again. We've got transmit frequency.
That ties right in.
Yeah.
Right.
There's your hunt.
Competition hunts. This is a scale from 1 to 7. It comes on at 4. These detectors operate at 6.59 kilohertz. As we increase the transmit frequency, that's going to increase that transmit power so that it can not work with somebody who is, say, at a lower transmit. When we go out together, I might go up to 5, and the fellow I'm hunting with goes down to, say, 2 or 3.
I might mention here, and this is a little secret, you want to stay at 4 and let your buddy go up to 5.
That's right.
Because 4 is the ideal frequency for the maximum penetration. It's not much different, so you're not doing them a real disservice. But if you want to stay someplace, you stay at 4, let somebody else change. Okay.
That's right. Another nice feature to bring in at this point is anytime you want to get back to the last adjustment you made, you always just push the arrow pad. So if you're going out to a competition hunt and you know that you're going to want to change frequencies rapidly while you're hunting. You adjust for transmit frequency right before you go out onto the field, and then any